Good evening, everybody. I'm Ryan O'Donnell. Tonight, we're helping you get to know the candidates vying for a shot at being the next governor of Tennessee. As your local election headquarters, we're bringing you the final of 3 debates. Already, we have had 2 Republican debates, one each in West and Middle Tennessee, featuring Republican candidates Bill Lee, Randy Boyd, Beth Harwell, and Diane Black. Plans for a 3rd Republican debate unraveled. Well, tonight brings our first opportunity to hear from Democrats running for governor. Craig Fitzhugh and Karl Dean. Dean, the former mayor of Nashville, Fitzhugh, the House Minority Leader. Our current governor is Republican Bill Haslam, coming to the end of his term. It's a time that's seen state lawmakers try twice and fail twice to expand Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act with a program called Insure Tennessee. That health insurance issue remaining an unsolved question, with more than 100,000 Tennesseans caught in a gap between programs to help them afford care. Now, something you'll likely hear about tonight. And of course, there's also education to discuss. Tennessee has had a rough go when it comes to standardized testing, TN-ready testing going off the rails. This at a time when Tennessee schools are doing better but still lag behind other parts of the country in some areas. Now, as your local election headquarters, we bring you the 3rd and final debate in our Tennessee Governor Debate Series live from the Clayton Performing Arts Center at Pellissippi State Community College.
Tonight, politics in Tennessee taking center stage. The 2 leading Democratic candidates for governor in their first statewide televised debate. From Rocky Top and the Great Smoky Mountains to the Mississippi River, the heart of Republican country. A place that could play a major role in the race. Karl Dean, the former mayor of Nashville, and Craig Fitzhugh, House Minority Leader. Where they stand on these controversial issues like school safety, healthcare, and immigration. Voters will find out tonight during our 3rd Tennessee governor debate.
We are live at Pellissippi State Community College in Knoxville tonight. Welcome to tonight's Tennessee Governor Debate. Good evening, everyone. I'm Kristen Farley, the evening anchor at WATE 6 on your side here in Knoxville. Now, this will be the final time you will be able to hear these gubernatorial candidates debate the big issues on stage statewide before the August 2nd primary. So, we once again want to make sure that we let you know, as your local election headquarters, we are broadcasting all across the state right now. And we do want to welcome in our viewers from Memphis, Nashville, Knoxville, Chattanooga, Jackson, the Tri-Cities, and down in Huntsville, Alabama. Now, you can follow along on social media as well tonight using the hashtag you see in the bottom left of your screen, TNGovDebate. There you will also find a lot of additional resources and links to some of the questions that we'll be asking throughout the night. Now let's go ahead and take a look at some of the rules for the debate, everyone. There are no opening statements. Candidates will each be given 60 seconds to answer the main questions. The sound of a bell will ring when that time is up. Candidates will be allowed 30 seconds for follow-up questions or rebuttal, and they will have 30 seconds for closing statements at the end of the debate. Now, we do want to introduce you to the 2 candidates on stage with us tonight, former mayor of Nashville, Karl Dean, and Tennessee House Minority Leader Craig Fitzhugh. Gentlemen, thank you both for being with us tonight. Now to tonight's panel of journalists from all across our state. Katina Rankin, anchor at WATN Local 24 in Memphis, and Richard Ransom, also an anchor at WATN, and Bob Mueller, anchor at WKRN-TV in Nashville. Earlier this week, there was a random card draw to see which candidate would get that first question, and Katina Rankin has that first question for us tonight. Katina.
Gentlemen, first let me say good evening and thank you both for being here. Now, as you both know, President Donald Trump has nominated Brett Kavanaugh to be the next Supreme Court Justice. If he's confirmed, Roe versus Wade may come into play. So if the ruling is overturned, 4 states have said they'll end abortion. Another 9 states would halt abortions temporarily, and 7 states would continue abortion access. But currently, the state of Tennessee has no guidance on what to do. You've both said that you are pro-choice. So will you propose keeping abortion available right here in the state of Tennessee? Mr. Dean, we are going to begin with you.
Yeah, I think it's very important that as a state we do more to protect women's health and to actually provide more access to health for women all over our state. Abortion is a very emotional issue, and I ultimately believe that it is an issue that needs to be resolved by a woman, that is a matter of choice, and that she should be free to consult with her doctors, with her faith, and with her family. But ultimately, it is the woman's choice.
Mr. Dean, thank you. Mr. Fitzhugh.
Yes, I agree. I think that we certainly should move more restrictive in those areas should this happen. And we know it's a long way from happening now. We may be getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but certainly women's health is of primary importance, and those particular health matters concerning abortion really shouldn't be the government's business, in my opinion. And as the mayor said, it should be a choice of the woman herself and whomever she would like to share that choice with her. So no, I would not propose further restrictions.
Well, I do have to ask you a follow-up, because you both have said that it is a woman's prerogative, it's her choice. However, if abortion is no longer available in the state of Tennessee and a woman is living here and she wants to have an abortion, what would you then tell her, Mr. Dean?
Well, I do think at this point we're getting down the road to the point where I don't know whether this will actually happen or these hypotheticals are useful to us in any way. If Roe versus Wade is reversed, and we're a long way from that happening, and you come back to the state of Tennessee, then you're going to have to redefine what is the right to abortion, how you define it, what restrictions are going to be allowed. And we'll just have to wait and see what happens.
Mr. Dean, thank you. Mr. Fitzhugh.
I have confidence in our system, a legal system. I'm a lawyer, and I understand pretty good how these things work, and this has been the law for many years, and stare decisis steps in, and if this is a settled law, we just shouldn't be changing it. But if in fact it does, we will as Tennesseans, if there's something that we should do, we will have to look at it at that time, and we'll see what we can do and then move forward from there. It's just a bit premature, I think.
Gentlemen, thank you. Richard.
All right, pleasure to be with you, candidates. Having just made the drive from Memphis to Knoxville, I think Katina and I have a renewed appreciation for what it's like to run a statewide campaign. Tennessee is a very long state. It's also a state with only one NFL team. And we're going to ask you an NFL question because it's making headlines once again just this week, halting their new policy on the national anthem for the time being. Also this week, Tennessee Titans player Jarrell Casey said he plans to protest on the field during the national anthem this season. Do you view this as a First Amendment right, or do you see it as a disrespect to the flag? Mr. Fitzhugh, we'll start with you.
I've said sort of jokingly, but not really. I said, do you expect me, a veteran, the only veteran in this race, to stand by, and my service was to let some multi-million-dollar football player actually not stand for the national anthem because of something he felt violated his First Amendment rights? You're dadgum right, I would. I think it's important that this is something that we do. After all, this is a sporting event. It doesn't mean anything necessarily derogatory about our flag. Many times when you kneel, you do it for a solemn purpose. And if that's that purpose, I really see that person has that particular right. Now, I'm going to, I walk by the TV and I hear the national anthem. I'm going to, snap to and stop and do it. But there's certain things that it's important to people, and if they want to do that in a respectful manner, I support that.
Mr. Dean, your position on this, a First Amendment issue, or do you see it more as a disrespect to the flag?
I see it as a First Amendment issue. Certainly, we want people to stand and salute when the national anthem is being played, but there's also protest, and protest sometimes makes people uncomfortable, and that is generally the idea behind it, is to facilitate a discussion about issues that people believe are not getting the attention they deserve, or that they want to bring about changes in our society. And this has happened throughout our country's history. And so I see it as more of an issue about the First Amendment. Certainly we want people to stand, and I stand for the flag, but I certainly would protect the right of people to express their opinions and to protest.
Then I have to ask you as a follow-up, most polls show that probably most Tennessee voters would disagree with you on this. They see this very clearly as showing disrespect to the flag. So what would you say to Tennessee voters who have this point of view? Mr. Fitzhugh?
You know, I am sort of old school with that. I don't particularly like when you put a flag on your back or you wear one as a scarf. To me, that could be just as disrespectful. It depends on the manner in which you do that. So I think folks look close. You know, it's not the flag, it's what the flag stands for, and it stands for the ability to people to be able to protest in a peaceful manner.
So, Mr. Dean, as you're campaigning around the state and someone comes up to you and says, no, this is more about disrespecting the flag, what would you say to them?
Well, I understand polls. Obviously, everybody who runs for office does. But that's kind of the idea of this, is that it is a protest. It draws attention to what that party is concerned about, and it draws attention to their issues. And people don't like it. But it will facilitate, hopefully, discussions that will result in change. And so one of the ways to bring about change is actually, instead of condemning each other and fighting, is to reach out and try to have a conversation about the issues that lead people to protest.
All right, thank you. Mr. Dean. Bob.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us tonight and sharing your views. Here in 2018, I'd like to get your views on corporal punishment in public schools. Tennessee is one of only 19 states that still allows corporal punishment in public schools, and is one of 8 states where 15% of the schools still actively use corporal punishment. What's your stance on this issue? Is corporal punishment effective, or is it time to end this practice? Mr. Dean?
I think it's time to end the practice. I think there's lots of... obviously, we ask a lot of our educators, we ask a lot of our schools, but I think actually using corporal punishment is a step too far, and I would like to see that gone.
Thank you, Mr. Dean. Mr. Fitzhugh?
Times have changed, and children are, I think, smarter and can adhere their conduct to the conduct they should have in school. So I think we're beyond that. I truly do. I can feel the backside when I was coming up, but I think it's time that we did not burden our teachers and our staff with that from a third-party perspective, and it's time to move on.
On a personal follow-up, would either of you have allowed your children or grandchildren to be spanked in public schools, Mr. Dean?
I would not have.
Mr. Fitzhugh?
Most certainly not. Not my grandchildren, for sure. No, I'm just...
Thank you, gentlemen. Richard?
You're a proud grandfather. Nothing wrong with that. All right, let's ask you one other school-related question. It's one that I hate that we even have to ask, related to school safety. Of course, the Parkland, Florida school shooting in February claimed 17 lives and reignited the gun debate. Increasing school safety is a national discussion. One of the recommendations, of course, in Tennessee is to arm teachers in our schools. During a gubernatorial forum on education back in April, Mr. Fitzhugh, you called the idea stupid. That's a direct quote. Mr. Dean, you previously said there have to be other ways of solving this problem. As governor, what are 3 tangible changes you would make to ensure that our schools are safe in Tennessee? Mr. Fitzhugh?
Thank you. And that's still my answer, stupid. But 3 things I think we should do is recognize that we have a problem that children are scared to go to school. We have to make it safe. The best thing we can do, I think, is to have an SRO, a school resource officer in every school, at least one. And that's going to be expensive, and we took a step to do that in the legislature this year by authorizing off-duty policemen and retired policemen to help with school safety, but I'm talking about a trained SRO. So that's one. We need to do better background checks to prevent people from having these types of weapons, so they're so easy to obtain, because they're going to some place like a school. It's just happened. And you know, the third one would be, I don't know, I think we need to use some more security methods around our school, get local government involved. You know, when we have a football game at a school, there'll be 10 or 12 policemen at a football game at least. And in school, we may just have one.
Same question to you, Mr. Dean. 3 tangible things you would do.
Well, I was mayor when Sandy Hook occurred, and one of the things we did was work immediately with the school board to do things to improve our facilities and make them safer, and I'm sure there's more work we can do there. I think SROs are the preferable way to go, and working with law enforcement, retired law enforcement, we can make our schools safer. And then I think we have to have this discussion about guns. I understand Tennessee is a state that's strong support of the Second Amendment, and I know that there has not been really any gun measures passed in the legislature in recent years. But I think we need to begin the discussion, and I would begin the discussion on the issue of background checks. We clearly can agree, I hope, and then have a discussion about how we keep weapons out of the hands of dangerous people. I think we all can agree that somebody who is a criminal, somebody who's accused of domestic violence, somebody who has a serious mental illness should not have a gun, and how we can accomplish that. We can do that by talking together and working together to protect our kids.
All right, thank you, Mr. Dean. Katina.
Okay. Even though we have none in the state of Tennessee, Republicans have made a substantial issue of sanctuary cities in Tennessee. So if a city under your administration decided that it did not want to follow federal immigration rules, what would you do about it? We're going to begin with you, Mr. Dean.
Well, let me begin by saying I do watch all the different ads that are on TV, and there is this discussion about sanctuary cities, and there's discussions about walls. But those are issues that in this governor's race we really have no control over. There are no sanctuary cities in Tennessee, and this is an issue looking for a problem. If I think you follow the law, that's just kind of my, as a lawyer, as the former lawyer for the city of Nashville and a public defender, I think my advice to people is always, you follow the law. That's what we should do. But we wouldn't have an immigration issue if Congress would do its job and finally reform immigration that we've been waiting now for 10, 15 years to occur. This is ultimately a federal issue. They need to resolve it, and the burden is really on Congress to get something done.
Mr. Dean, thank you. Mr. Fitzhugh.
I would agree and say that it is a solution looking for a problem. That's it exactly. But I have a concern because we have no sanctuary cities, and we haven't even had. But we passed a law. When I say we, the legislature, was almost stopped on a bipartisan basis, which will have desperate unintended consequences that may even do something as radical as make the Department of Human Service fall under this law, where ICE officials will come in and take children from them. So we have to be very careful about what we do. You know, people want to have a safe community, but we have to be careful that we don't do it for the wrong reasons, political. We do it for the right reasons to keep our state and community safe.
Well, gentlemen, you are both correct in saying that it is a federal issue. However, this past legislative session, Tennessee lawmakers, they passed a bill banning sanctuary cities, even though Tennessee, as I have previously mentioned and you've noted, have none. But Governor Haslam allowed the bill to become law without his signature. If you are elected governor, would you veto that bill if it came to your desk? And if so, why? Mr. Dean, we'll begin again with you.
Well, I would veto the bill, and I think at times, you got to first understand, I think it's implicit in the question, the nature of the governor's veto power in Tennessee. The veto of a governor is overridden in Tennessee by a simple majority. So if a legislature is able to pass a law and they pass it with a good margin, that's going to be overridden. And so I think that went into Governor Haslam's thinking. But sometimes it's important to use the bully pulpit. It's important to send the message that you need to send, which is say this is just wrong, this has some legal questions, and then veto it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dean. Mr. Fitzhugh.
I made a personal request to the governor and his council to veto that bill. I thought it was a terrible bill, and we'll continue, and we'll do that. I treat a veto very, very seriously, and it isn't only a 50-vote thing, but sometimes you have to do things even though you think they might be ultimately successful, and this was one that I would have vetoed.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Bob.
Gentlemen, you both have talked about in favor of expanding Medicaid here in Tennessee, and you both know with this current legislature that's likely not going to happen. This Republican-controlled legislature wouldn't even give the Republican governor a hearing on insured Tennessee, which would have expanded Medicaid. Currently, the estimate is over 300,000 Tennesseans are without health insurance. As a Democratic governor working with the Republican legislature, what can you do for these thousands of Tennesseans who either don't have or can't afford health insurance? Mr. Fitzhugh.
Obama, I want to congratulate you on your most recent award in the Hall of Fame, but I hate to say you're wrong, because you said you didn't think it would happen. I take a different approach on Medicaid expansion. If you talk to me more than 3 minutes, I will mention Medicaid expansion. It has been something that we've been working on for over 4 years, and I think the reasons that have been given have all been asked and answered not to do this. I think that if I'm the governor, I have enough rapport with my colleagues in the House and Senate, and I know what the governor's plan shows, and I know what we can do to improve it, and I think if we can get that bill to the floor, it will seriously pass. So it's going to be my first prerogative. My first thing I do is to try to get this next 111th legislature to expand Medicaid, and I truly believe it can happen because there's no reason why. Why not? It makes every moral sense. It makes every medical sense. It makes every mathematical sense to do it. And I believe the colleagues in the legislature can understand.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzhugh. Mr. Dean?
Yes, I believe it can be done, and I think the best way to get it done is to elect me governor, because that would send the message that needs to be sent, that this is what the people of Tennessee want. And the facts are, if you look at polling that Vanderbilt has done, that the majority of the people of Tennessee support it. And what we know now, which we probably knew was going to happen then, but we know for a fact now, we know we've lost $4 billion we could have used to make health care accessible to people. We know we have 10 hospitals closed, mostly in rural and in small town Tennessee, which has had a devastating effect on those places. And we know that our state is being hurt in lots of different ways. And so I think we can talk to our colleagues, our Republican colleagues, and say, let's make this decision not on partisan political lines. Let's do this in a rational, reasonable way, what's best for the future of all Tennesseans, what's best for our economy and what's best for our people. And then I think you get Medicaid expansion. And Virginia just did it 2 months ago.
Gentlemen, you both know this is all about cost, and costs continue to go up for health care. Under the previous Democratic governor, under Phil Bredesen, because of increase in costs, he was forced to cut TennCare by 100,000 Tennesseans that are now without health insurance. As a Democratic governor, how do you make sure that your administration doesn't face that same issue? Where does the money come from? Mr. Fitzhugh.
I was there when this happened. It's different now because we were trying to do too much with state funds only, and we didn't have the capacity. I hated that we had to do that, but that system was out of control. We do much better at that now, and I intend to improve that. But under no way will we sacrifice the ability to give health care and cut it back. And I don't think we'll have to from a monetary standpoint. We watch it now, and especially if we can get the added resources from expansion.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzhugh. Mr. Dean?
Well, as in everything, you got to keep an eye on your expenses. TennCare is generally a very successful operation right now. We need to make sure that we constantly look for savings, look for better ways to operate it. And I'm also very concerned that if we have a recession, we got to make sure we have the rainy day funds in the health care area available, because that's one of the first areas you'd start seeing increased demands on.
Thank you, gentlemen. Richard?
Gentlemen, funding for state government, I don't have to tell you, is always a challenge. It's a challenge at every level of government. One solution that has come up recently is the result of a U.S. Supreme Court decision which recently decided to let states legalize betting on professional and college sports. If either of you end up in the governor's office next year, you most likely will have to take a position on this issue. Some of our neighboring states, such as Mississippi, Kentucky, and Missouri, have already put the wheels into motion. In fact, Mississippi thinks it might be ready to go next weekend. In Tennessee, lawmakers are expected to introduce legislation in the next session. Fans would be able to bet on their Vols or their Titans or their Grizzlies. Do you support sports betting in Tennessee? Mr. Dean, we'll start with you on that one.
Well, I think there's a couple issues that have to be resolved first. First is whether there is a constitutional issue about whether we need a referendum or not. You know, you can argue that one both ways, but that issue needs to be resolved. I think that we need to at least realize that this is not going to be a quick fix for the state of Tennessee. This is a state that has not embraced gambling, certainly not embraced casinos. We only recently allowed wine being sold on Sundays. And I think we have got to go through a process where we respect the beliefs of the people of the state, figure out what people want, and understand what the law is. But it also reminds me of the lottery in that this is going to happen all around us. And there will be people taking advantage of going to other states and spending their money there. So I think this is going to be an issue that's going to be sort of front and center in the next year or so, and we'll see where it goes.
Mr. Fitzhugh, what do you think? Sports betting or not?
Well, I think we have to look into it. We have so we are so limited in the ability to raise revenue in this state. Every one of the candidates in this race say, what are you going to do about teacher salary? We're going to raise them. Well, you can say that, but if we have a recession, which this governor hasn't had in the last 8 years, the first one in about 100 years that hadn't had it, we're going to have a downturn. We're going to have to figure out how to do this. And this is one option we need to look at. We might even be able to direct it to teacher salaries, to give them that trust fund that we can use that money to keep their salaries going up. So yes, I think it's something because look, it's happening in Tennessee now. We are just not getting any revenue from it, and I don't think you're going to keep it from happening. So you might as well try to help the citizens of Tennessee by the revenue that we can claim from that particular activity.
So let me follow up on this a little bit more with you, Mr. Dean. You alluded to it. There are really two approaches we can take on this issue. We can decide that we have to change the Constitution or amend the Constitution like we did with the lottery, or we can do this little fast-track thing, which has worked in the past too, where, for example, it wasn't long ago, we decided to fast-track a measure that would allow sports betting online. So let me push you on that. You want to hear what the people have to say. What do you have to say?
Well, I mean, I certainly agree that, as I said, this is going to happen in every state around us, and we're going to have needs for revenue. But the issue about whether it requires a referendum, whether it requires a constitutional amendment, is one that will be decided by the courts ultimately. I mean, if somebody tries to do a fast track, there will be a legal issue raised, and it will be resolved in the courts. And so I don't think it's going to happen overnight in Tennessee, and I do think it's worthwhile studying, and it's something that we may need to do, and particularly like the lottery, when everybody else around us is doing it, we're going to need to do it too.
All right, let me see if I can get a more direct answer from you, Mr. Fitzhugh. Do we need to amend the Constitution, or do you support that, or do we need a fast-track approach?
Well, if there's a possibility of a legitimate fast track under the law because of the court ruling, and you know, if it somehow could something like, well, Tennessee is not authorizing gambling, we're just gaining the revenues from the gambling that's authorized on the interstate situation, maybe something like that would work. So, but yes, we're probably going to have to do something quickly if it's a constitutional amendment or some type of fast track to make sure that we don't fall farther behind in this particular issue.
All right, thank you, Mr. Fitzhugh. Well, gentlemen, you may or may not be glad to hear that we're halfway through the debate at this point. Kristen?
All right, Richard, thank you so much. Again, everyone at home, we want to remind you, you are watching our third of our Governor Debate Series, broadcast live from Knoxville, Tennessee, all across our state. And throughout the evening, don't forget, you can follow along on social media using the hashtag TNGovDebate. There are also links there for additional resources and the questions we are asking throughout the night. And don't forget, everyone, we're going to be right back with more questions for all of the candidates here in Knoxville. Your local election headquarters welcoming you back to tonight's Tennessee Governor Debate. Again, we are broadcasting live from Pellissippi State Community College here in Knoxville, Tennessee. Good evening again, everyone. I'm Kristen Farley. If you are just now joining us for the first time this evening, we do want to remind you we have two of the leading Democratic candidates for governor on stage with us tonight. Once again, we do want to introduce them to you. We have former Mayor of Nashville, Karl Dean, and State House Minority Leader Craig Fitzhugh. Also, another reminder at home, you can follow along on social media using the hashtag TNGovDebate. There are additional resources and questions there as well. But right now, we do want to get right back to the questions. Katina Rankin has the first one.
Okay, gentlemen, as you know, the bust of the Confederate general and former KKK leader Nathan Bedford Forrest sits inside of the state capitol. Now, there have been calls to remove that bust, but the State Capitol Commission has rejected that idea not once, but twice in the past. And both of you have said that you agree that the bust should be removed. So if you become governor, please list the steps that you'll take to make that happen. Mr. Fitzhugh, we're going to begin with you.
Thanks. I definitely think that in that sort of little rotunda that we have there that has 5 or 6 of them that's supposed to be the most famous and important Tennesseans, that statue is not appropriate there. Now, it may be appropriate at a battlefield or something like that, but it should go. And I don't like the fact that we put up these artificial barriers and committees don't meet and the commission doesn't meet. I think we need to have a conversation about it, a strong conversation, maybe even a bill to require it. And I would certainly certainly support that if the current process, which was frankly just done for this particular statute, doesn't work out. So it's important. It's important to me, but it's important for those school children that come up there and they look up and they see who's up there, especially those of color. Those kids, you know, they don't need to think that this is a high point in our history, because it wasn't. It was a low point. Now, we don't need to forget about it. We need to study it, but this isn't right.
Mr. Fitzhugh, thank you. Mr. Dean, okay, you heard your opponent there. He said that one thing he would do is have a conversation. The second thing, perhaps, introduce a bill. Can you list the steps that you would take to remove that bust?
Well, I think you need to work within what's been set up with this commission and hope that they do the right thing. I certainly do not believe this is sort of like a hall of honor here, and this bust should not be there. And whether you have to go to the legislature and ask for a bill to get that accomplished, or whether you can work with this commission, or whether you can use the bully pulpit again of just saying that this is not what should be representing our state. This has a proper role, perhaps in a museum or somewhere else, but not in this particular place, not in one of the most spectacular and honored positions in our state capitol.
Okay, gentlemen, so if you're willing to remove that bust, right? Let's talk about another government program, and that is those vanity plates, okay? They have the Confederate flag on them, and that's the one specifically that I'm talking about. Sales very recently have been on the rise. So if you become governor, will you stop offering the Confederate vanity plate based on you wanting that bust also removed? Mr. Fitzhugh?
I voted, years ago when this happened, I voted against that bill. I lost that vote. It's the law now. The law would have to be changed. I don't think it's appropriate. I certainly don't. I think the Sons of Confederate Veterans is certainly a fine organization, and I think they deserve a plate. But with that symbol on there, the way it's become is just not appropriate. But it's the law right now. We'd have to change the law to do that. I don't like the Alabama plate either, just to tell you the truth. I think we made a mistake when we started offering those out-of-state plates.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fitzhugh. Mr. Dean, would you?
No, I don't think that type of plate is appropriate. It sends a message, and I think the message is clear from the fact that sales have increased as we've gone through this sort of national discussion around how we honor our history and how we reevaluate what we have done in the past. And I would seek to stop that practice.
I'm going to stay on this topic for just a minute because it is a statewide issue, and it is a hot topic across the state. In different communities, they are reacting differently. In the Bluff City, in Memphis, statues were removed. Then here in Knoxville, a Fort Sanders Confederate monument has been vandalized. As you know, there's been protests and there's been rally over these Confederate monuments. Do you believe local communities should have a say in which monuments are displayed? Mr. Fitzhugh.
Yes, and I did, and that was the primary reason that I was so strong in my defense of what Memphis did. It's their park. It's their statute. It was clear in that city that they didn't want it. They had every right to take it down. Now, they used some legal maneuvering, but they did it legally. And I think it was the appropriate thing to do. And that's a problem I see with our legislature here recently, in that we have, as the legislature, we have taken things that used to be local matters and moved them to the state level, which we shouldn't have done, and that being one of them.
All right, thank you, Mr. Fitzhugh. Mr. Dean.
Yeah, well, as a former mayor, these issues about local state come up a lot, and there's not really one across-the-board answer. But I think clearly what's in your parks, what statutes your citizens have to walk by every day, should be left up to local government. And I don't think the state government expressed any interest in these statutes until they started coming down. And that reflected what the local people wanted. And the people in Memphis figured out a way to do it legally, and congratulations to them.
Okay. Gentlemen, thank you both. Bob.
Gentlemen, as you well know, what happens in Washington affects us here in Tennessee. The Trump trade policy has resulted in tariffs on aluminum, steel, and soybeans. Now, Tennessee's elected Republican senators, both of them an elected governor, have said that these trade policies are hurting Tennessee, which voted for President Trump, maybe more so than any other state, especially the automobile industry, washing machine industry, and Tennessee farmers. The end result could be higher prices for Tennessee-made products like cars and washing machines. The tariffs could also lead to layoffs and production reductions. As governor, what can you do to offset some of the hurt that these tariffs are having on Tennessee products? Mr. Dean?
Well, I think one of the things we can do, obviously you should speak out as governor and say what is best for our state, and hopefully the president listens. But one thing we need to do as a state is always work on economic development. It's something I did a lot of as mayor of Nashville. I think one thing the state could look at is always thinking strategically about how we diversify our economy and how we don't have, we will always have some sectors that are doing very, very well. I think that is absolutely essential. I mean, long term, I think we have to take ownership of our own problems, be creative, find solutions, and be aggressive about our own economic development. And the key part of that, to me, is workforce development. That is the issue, I think, for the future. People always talk about incentives, but I think Tennessee is so well positioned. Our issue is going to be is whether we can develop the workforce here that will allow us to continue to attract great jobs and get it spread around the state. Thank you, Mr. Dean. Mr. Fitzhugh?
This policy really worries me because I don't think it has economic foundations that are good. I'm not an economist, but I'm more of a free trade guy than an isolationist, and I'm also a rural guy, and I know right now it's hurting our farmers. Farmers are booking soybeans, and they're booking them at 20 to 25% less than they did, and there's not that much profit margin in them. So, and the steel is the same way. It's going to have an effect. We can spread that out a little because we don't have the only companies the only factories of a particular company in a state. So, but they're going to hurt us. And I think we as a state need to look at these industries and say, for the short term, until Mr. Trump comes to his senses, that we'll try to help our farmers. We'll try to help the automotive industry to get through this period of time until it's clearly proven that they're not the right thing to do. We've done that before when we had people in an emergency situation in a flood. We've done it with farmers before with the tobacco settlement. So I think we need to see if we can't make sure those industries just don't go down the tubes because of this.
As a follow-up, what as a governor and along with your ECD commissioner could you do to help these industries and farmers find markets that aren't part of the tariff, that aren't being part of that tariff? Mr. Dean?
Well, I think you've got to work aggressively with ECD to try to find other markets. I mean, clearly, you know, what I've been reading about soybeans recently is Brazil is coming out as sort of the big winner in this because their markets have expanded, but they're also buying lower priced goods from the United States. And so I think any sort of help, aid, expertise the state can provide, we should provide it, and we probably should set up something within ECD that is specifically designed to give farmers the most up-to-date information they need.
Thank you, Mr. Dean. Mr. Fitzhugh?
I agree with that, and I would also say, you know, Tennessee is moving toward medicinal cannabis. I think if that can be proven to be something that's appropriate, and I think it is, if it's suggested by a doctor, it's regulated, and it's taxed, then that might be an opening for a farmer to go into that business. Now, I hope it doesn't take that long for these trade policies to change, but if not, that's something that we need to look at.
Thank you, gentlemen. Katina?
Okay, we're now going to move on to the individual questions that we have for you. And Mr. Fitzhugh, we are going to begin with you because, as you know, physician-assisted suicide is a controversial topic everywhere, but especially here in the South. And 3 years ago, as House Minority Leader, you proposed the Death with Dignity bill, 2 versions of the bill have failed to gain traction. But if you're elected governor, will you push for this legislation again?
I did that. I did that because a great friend of mine, John J. Hooker, was very deathly ill, and he asked me to, and I did. I had misgivings about that, but the more I talked, the more I learned about it. I think it has something that we need to look at in Tennessee. So I have not done that since because I'm still studying that. But that was the reason. That was the real reason that I did that, because I respected that man and he had some good ideas. But it's something. It's those issues that we sometimes have to tackle in a state, and sometimes it's what people want. And I think we need to discuss those issues, have a full and fair discussion. That's one reason I think it helps when you have a Republican legislature and a Democratic governor. You can have those discussions because it's balanced out. Right now, we don't have a chance to have some discussions because the Republicans are too busy arguing amongst themselves to get things done. So I think it will help that issue and others.
So really quickly, yes or no, would you push for it if you were governor?
I'm not ready to push for it because I need to get back into that subject and see where we are. That was 3 years ago. You're right about that.
And as you know, we are in the Bible Belt. So moving forward, do you think that this is really a religious decision, or do you think it's a personal one?
It's a personal quality of life decision.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Fitzhugh. Richard.
All right, Mr. Dean, for your individual question, I want to ask you about a recent campaign ad of yours. It focuses on forgotten Tennessee. We've all seen it. Places where jobs have left, families can't get health care, and students can't get the skills they need. Forgotten Tennessee sounds a lot like President Trump's forgotten men and women from his victory speech. Are you trying to appeal to Trump supporters a little bit here?
Well, I'm trying to appeal to everyone, but no, it's not designed for that at all. I mean, I do think that there are people in Tennessee who are forgotten. I think the issue here is, particularly if you think of small towns and rural areas, the issues I'm talking about, which are public education, where these areas often don't have the tax base to do what they want to do with their schools. You have economic issues where they've lost jobs back in the 80s and 90s, they haven't gotten back. They don't have access to the internet, and their hospitals closing. And so these are folks I see as forgotten, and those are the issues I talk about in rural, suburban, and urban Tennessee. And I would throw in urban areas too, where kids in Nashville who might not be getting the education they need because of education issues, or issues that we have with hospitals, or the city of Memphis, where the poverty rate with African Americans is, I think, about 47%. And that should be unacceptable. And that's the people I'm talking about, the people I want to help.
Well, you've identified, folks, you've identified the problem. But if you're elected governor, you're going to have to contend with the Republican legislature. So as you look at these different issues, knowing that they have not been willing to spend money on urban infrastructure, Medicaid, things like that, what are you going to do, I guess, to bring companies to these areas, providing the jobs, et cetera?
Well, because the time is so limited on these, but let me just talk about Memphis for a minute. I think that we have got to say as a state that Memphis is in a different situation when it comes to economic development. I have done a lot of economic development work. We brought about 70,000 jobs to Nashville. But Memphis every day, unlike Nashville, competes with states that are right next to it. They compete to maintain its tax base. They compete to keep their jobs. And we have to do more there. We have to say we're going to start winning some of these economic development battles there. And we're going to do everything that we can to maintain the tax base of Memphis so they can invest in schools and police and
But when it comes
parks.
to handling the Republican legislature.
Well, that's another. I'll be happy to answer that one too if you
I'll
give
give you
time.
10 seconds.
All right. Look, I think
quick, I've asked.
it is not uncommon in America to have a governor of one party and a legislature of another. It's happened in Tennessee. Lamar Alexander, we had Democratic legislature. Phil Bredesen, second term, Republican legislature. Two of the most talked about governors in the country. Steve Bullock in Montana is a Democrat. Montana is Republican. Baker in Massachusetts, Republican. Democratic legislature. You got to reason, you got to work together, you got to be willing to compromise. It pushes people toward the middle. And you've got to use reason, but you've got to be realistic.
Okay, I hear your point.
I sure would like to respond to
absolutely.
that.
Go ahead, Mr. Fitzgerald.
I'm concerned about this forgotten Tennessee thing.
Okay.
I live in a rural area. I live 50 miles from that city he's talking about, Memphis. They're not forgotten. I don't forget them. I haven't forgotten them in the 24 years that I've been in the legislature. It's just tough out there, and I'm glad to see the mayor coming down and visiting Memphis and visiting in West Tennessee and Middle Tennessee and East Tennessee. I've been visiting there all my life. I've been across this state a lot. So I don't like that. I'd rather say that there are those that are in the shadows of those skyscrapers that we need to help. They just need opportunity. They just need a little opportunity. It's not that they're forgotten. But
well, let me. If you spend any time in Memphis, and I spent a lot of time in Memphis, and you talk to people, you can't go an hour or an hour and a half without somebody saying, everybody thinks that the state ends at the Tennessee River. Everybody thinks that we're not getting our fair share. Everybody thinks, and you hear that over and over and over again, and you hear it and I believe them. I think that people are very sincere, that they feel disengaged from our state. And then what happened recently where the state legislature actually sought to punish Memphis for having the nerve to use its own parks.
All right. I'm going to end it there. I'll let you have one last word if you'd like to, just to keep it fair, Mr. Fitzhugh.
Well, no, I guess I'm getting a little semantic battle, but yes, there are many in the legislature that would just as soon Memphis wasn't in Tennessee. I'm just saying I'm not one of those. I understand Memphis. I understand that what Memphis has in its future, and it's really good. And my motto in my campaign is we all do better when we all do better. So that means we don't need to forget about folks. We need to lift them up.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Fitzhugh. Bob?
Thank you, Richard. A question for both of you gentlemen on outsourcing state jobs. In 2015, Governor Haslam established a committee of state executives to look at ways to eliminate 3,000 state jobs through outsourcing, custodial, maintenance, and groundskeeping jobs at prisons and state offices, as well as college campuses like UT, where there were protests opposing this idea. Do you support outsourcing as a cost-saving move if that means laying off state workers whose jobs are being replaced? Mr. Dean?
No, I think in general, I think you shouldn't be doing that. I mean, you don't want to take a firm stance on everything and say you would never look at working with a nonprofit or working with somewhere else where you get something done more efficiently. But, you know, things like parks. I don't think you outsource on parks. I don't think you privatize parks. I think parks are something that's been passed down from generation to generation as something that we need to protect and make sure that it's always there for the future. And you want it to be affordable for everybody in Tennessee to use. So those are areas where I would be very reluctant to get involved with privatization or outsourcing. I think the situation at UT, again, was an area I would not have done that sort of outsourcing.
Thank you, Mr. Dean. Mr. Fitzhugh?
I'm not for outsourcing on government functions. Right here in this campus, JLL, which is a Chicago company, is now, at this late stage in Governor Haslam's term, is now still trying to outsource things here. The public doesn't want this. We don't work good. You don't run a business. You don't run the state like a business, and here's why: because profit is a business. Is the motive of a business. People is the motive of a state. And in things like prisons, which has worked out not to be cheaper for our state, in things like parks, in things like universities, we don't save money. We might save it on that first contract, but that next one is going to rise and rise and rise. And it just doesn't do any good to outsource essential government functions. That's what our government is for. So you know, if you have a specialized thing where you need to get somebody in on a particular project, that's fine. Contracts are outsourced for construction and all that, and I have no problem with that. But the basic governmental functions, it's just not right.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your answer.
Gentlemen, Tennessee touts a robust economy with low unemployment, but for many Tennesseans, that is not necessarily a good thing. That's especially true in communities like Sevier County, which is recovering from wildfires 2 years ago, destroying 2,400 buildings, including affordable housing units. In fact, many people who work there are living outside the county because it's too expensive a place to live. As governor, you're going to be working to bring people and outside companies to Tennessee. Should financial incentives be offered by the state on development deals that require some component when it comes to affordable housing? Mr. Fitzhugh?
I particularly am worried about the affordable housing in our state. In a city like Nashville, which is just doing tremendously, I'm fearful that people are getting, they're not going to be able to afford to live there. In my communities, it's more of a affordable and adequate housing. It's affordable, but it's just not adequate. And I think housing is something for teachers. If it's too expensive for a teacher to live in an urban area or a rural area, then we're not going to get the teachers there. So I think this is something that we're going to see more importantly on the radar screen is housing. And yes, we do have those economic incentives, and I have no problem with doing that, because we have to be competitive with the states around us, and if it takes something like that, we certainly should look into it.
Mr. Dean, what's your take on this issue of affordable housing and some kind of component regarding that issue when it comes to development deals for Tennessee?
Yeah, I think that affordable housing is really a statewide issue. I think in Nashville, obviously, it's a major issue, but it's going everywhere, and Sevierville is a good example. The state can play a role with incentives, and the state can play the role through its own housing authority to make more funds available and to partner with local government to get things done. I think local government takes the lead, and the state can step in and issue and provide more money. And I think they actually are providing more money this year as compared to last, but there's a lot more that we can do. And as this problem grows statewide, I think we need to be more aggressive.
Well, as part of my follow-up question for you, too, I would like to get a show of hands on this one. What is your position on raising the state minimum wage. As you know, it's been at $7.25, commensurate with the federal minimum wage for many, many years. Many think it's long overdue that the minimum wage be raised as a way to help with the affordable housing issue. Of course, a lot of business folks say this is only going to hurt the very employees that we're trying to help, and they'd have to lay some folks off. Raise your hand, yes or no, if you think that the minimum wage should be raised. Please raise your hand. All right, so
Can we explain?
you both say yes. So to be fair about this, what would you like to see it raised to? There's pushes for $10 an hour, $15 an hour. How much?
Well, here's the deal. We have the most people per capita in this state working at the minimum wage than any other state. We don't have a state minimum wage right now. We're one of 6 states that don't, so we need one. And I'm not for popping it up to $15. I'm for moving it now. So businesses, if they have a concern, they can relate to that concern. But I'm certainly for adopting a minimum wage for this state and raising it.
All right, Mr. Dean, you also raised your hand. By how much would you like to see the minimum wage raised?
Well, I think our goal should be to have a livable wage, but realistically, again, dealing with the legislature and dealing with economic reality that you can't just jolt the system, I think we need to move it up. $7.25 is, people can't live on that, and so what I would like to see is us to move it up, certainly over $10. And I would like to see us be in a position where we're doing more and creating new and better jobs in our state.
All right, thank you, Mr. Dean. Bob.
Thank you, gentlemen. I'd like to get your views on the issue of disproportionate school discipline among minorities in public schools. African Americans make up 45% of the student population in Metro Nashville schools, about 14% of the population here in Knox County schools. Yet, a study by the New York Times in 2015 found black students in those same school systems are disciplined at a much higher rate than their white counterparts. 65% of suspensions were black students in Metro Nashville schools, 33% of suspensions were black students in Knox County schools. What do you believe the reason is for this disproportionate school discipline among minority students? Mr. Dean.
Well, I think this is a national issue, and certainly is one we have to address, and I think our goal should be to keep kids in school. I mean, one of the things that when I first became mayor, I worked on really hard was truancy. Because I remember from my days as a public defender that my clients as kids were leaving school when they were 12, 13, 14, and nobody was doing anything about it, and nobody was trying to keep them in school. And we needed to do things where nothing good happens when a child's not at school. And so suspending them, expelling them only magnifies the issue. And then to see that kids by racial lines are being treated differently also should raise some concerns. So my goal would be to do what we did in Nashville, set up truancy centers, set up centers where you get to the heart of the problem and keep kids in school, because that's the only place that you're going to accomplish your goal of educating them.
Thank you, Mr. Dean. Mr. Fitzhugh?
Education is undoubtedly the most important thing we do in this state. It's not a quick fix, it's our only fix. And I related a bit to older males, older African-American males on the street. There's an assumption made that if they're in a place where you don't think they should be, that they've done something wrong. And I think it filters down to the schools. And I think we have to have better training for our staff and our teachers to make sure we sort that thing out and be cognizant of the fact that we have children there that are learning and growing at different levels. So I think it's a problem, but I think the more emphasis we can put on education, the better off we are in that and many other reasons.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzhugh. Thank you, gentlemen. Richard?
All right, let's take a break from these serious policy questions for a minute and ask you something that maybe is a little bit more personal. It's very personal, as a matter of fact. If you're elected governor, one of your wives will be the First Lady of Tennessee. Mr. Fitzhugh, your wife Pam, and Mr. Dean, your wife Ann. See, we got nice romantic pictures there and everything. So we want to hear about the special moment years ago when you knew she was the one, and how did you propose? If you keep your answers to 30 seconds, because we want to make sure we get in time for your closing remarks. Mr. Fitzhugh.
Oh, me. Well, I've been married 44 years, and actually Pam and I actually went together earlier than that, so we've been together like 50 years. So my memory's a little fading on that, but it was when I was in law school. I proposed to her in a trailer where I was living, and in the bedroom there, the bed was there, and I dropped the ring off the bed and went under the bed. I retrieved the ring and gave it to her, it was the most romantic thing you've ever seen in your life. No. But it worked. I had to fight for that woman a long time, so I knew it was okay with her when I messed that up.
Yeah, it obviously worked. 50 years. Very good. Mr. Dean, how about you?
Well, I couldn't afford a ring, and so I'll just tell you how we met. We met in law school when both of us had been injured. I broke my leg, and I worked my way through school in a paper mill, and I broke my leg at a company outing. And then Ann was in a car accident, and so we went to the dance together, the law dance together, because we were both on crutches. And I realized pretty quick that she was somebody pretty special, and just wanted to spend my life with her.
All right, great stories. Well, that's it for tonight's main debate questions. Now we'll give each of you 30 seconds for your closing statements. And Mr. Dean, we'll start with you for closing statements.
Thank you. I'm running for governor because I believe the people of this state want a pragmatic, common-sense person to be their governor. The state is not looking for an extremist or somebody who only looks at things through partisan lenses. I want to work on the issues that matter to voters. I want to move our state forward. And to me, our best days are yet to come, but we need to work hard on public education. We need to work hard on economic opportunity. We need to work hard on health care. So I'm asking for your vote. I love this state, and I hope I get a chance to meet many of you as I continue to campaign.
Thank you, Mr. Dean. Mr. Fitzhugh, you get 30 seconds for your closing statement.
Well, I want to compliment Karl and me for showing up. The other side didn't want to do that, but we're here. Okay. This is my home. I love this state. I've lived here all my life. I just think, looking at my body of work, my record, if you're a believer in education, I'm your choice. If you're a believer in Medicaid expansion and health care for everybody, I'm your choice. If you believe in better jobs, especially not outsourcing jobs at the state level, I'm your choice. Now, I don't mean to sound that the way it does, but check me out and see. We're getting down to the short rows in this, so I would certainly appreciate your vote. Thank you.
Well, gentlemen, on behalf of Nexstar Broadcasting, thank you very much for being with us this evening. We appreciate it. Good luck to you with the rest of your campaigning. Christian, we're going to send it back to you.
All right, Katina, thank you so very much. And of course, we want to say thank you to all of you at home who tuned in tonight for our Tennessee governor debate. And we do want to remind you that August 2nd primary is right around the corner. Early voting underway, but it ends on July 28th. Keep that in mind. You can find all of the voting information you need by going to the Secretary of State's website. That address is right there on your screen, sos.tn.gov. Once again, thank you all for joining us tonight for our Tennessee debate series. Have a wonderful evening.